Hey, we are here today and we are talking with Dinalynn Rosenbush. And I am super excited because we are talking about not only speech and communication, especially in your littles, especially if you ever thought when your kids are having a little trouble with a word or they're trouble with a pronunciation, or maybe they're totally stuck. Like my son was stuttering for a while and I was like, what's happening? I don't know what's going on. And just, you don't know as a parent, you're unsure. I love that we're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about clarifying the skills that we need to have, the things that we need to think about. And Dinalynn is a fantabulous speech language therapist. And I've been learning a lot about speech and language therapists recently, and we don't talk about them enough because they do amazing things. It's not just speech. It's not pronunciation and all that stuff. It's also communication in general. I didn't know that. Did you know that? And it has a lot to do with how kids communicate in the world, their body language and everything. There's all this science behind it. It's super cool. You and I know that we love to geek out about some of that stuff. But Dinalynn is here to talk today about all of these things. And she's worked in schools. She's worked in private practice. She's working with families now, specifically to make sure that they're ready before things even start to be a problem. And that's one thing that I love. And we see a lot of similarities because you know that I love to make sure that our culture, our homeschool culture, is ready before we start to have love of learning drop. So that's what we're going to talk about today. You're getting for a total treat because she's incredible. Dinalynn, thank you so much for joining us today. We've been trying to get together forever, but we are here now and this is super exciting. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, happy to. Thank you, Cami. It is so nice to finally connect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can you share a little bit about just why you are pursuing? I mean, I know you love to work with families and you love to work with communication, but why is this such a passion for you? And you've taken it now into a private realm where you're actually working with groups of families and little kids and really pushing this idea that we need to be ready ahead of time.
I love it. Thank you for asking me. This is a great question, and it's a really nice place to start. In my backstory, I have worked as a speech pathologist for years, for decades, and I always saw the same patterns over and over, where once the child is struggling so much that they are considerably delayed, then they get into a program, and I see the child, treat the child, teach the parents as best as I can along the way. And that means at IEP time or the very few times a year that I actually get to have the interaction with mom and dad. And then at that time, they say, what can I do? And you splash them with ideas. And then you go away and they say thank you. And in that moment, those ideas made sense. But then when they leave and I don't get to see them regularly like I do with their kiddos, it doesn't make sense anymore because speech development and language development and listening development is ambiguous. How does it actually work behind the scenes? So I would work with moms and dads, and then I started thinking, I wonder what would happen if I tell the parents of 3-year-olds, you have to work with me with your child in order to work with me. Now, obviously, when you work in the schools, you can't actually say that, but I put that out there, hoping that parents would actually bite. And I did get parents to bite at that. And what we started doing was, for the parents that were willing, they came into my classroom 20 minutes a week and worked with me with their child. And those kiddos made super lot of progress. And I did that for about 20 years, where the parents then would learn how to drip that communication development throughout mealtime and bath time and getting in the car time and putting on your shoe time. They would drip it for 30 seconds here and 5 seconds there. And those kiddos grew tremendously. And I even got to interview one of those parents on my podcast where he walked through the experience with me. So that was like super fun. So that's episode 154 if listeners are there on the language of play. But what I did at that point was I learned that when parents don't know anything, like this one man, about child development, about speech and language development, and they come coachable, then those kiddos really, really grow. In the meantime, we've seen with the internet that we have parents now that are just bombarded with lots of information and they try. And so there's a whole different dynamic now where we've got lots of parents that are trying a lot of things, but it might not be pertinent to what that child needs in order for them to grow in their area of struggle. So I started my business, which is different. So I still see kids in the daytime with my day job, and I do that part-time. And then I started the business, The Language of Play, because I thought, what I saw with this family, and then many families after that, was if I can teach mom and dad when those kiddos are really young, then those kiddos grow really fast. So this person that had come, his child was 3 years old and only had vowel sounds. And in 1 calendar year, she was caught up to age level. So she was out of speech by age 4. And this isn't because of my magic, but it is because dad was coachable and was able to take one step at a time and implement for a week, and then one step at a time, again, implement for the week, and learn how to do it in drips in his normal everyday moments. So I didn't give him like worksheets, pages, not another thing to stick on the table and have somebody sit still, because that's not how we're made to learn. So it's so good. That's how I transitioned from working with kids to now really focused on building this business where I'm working with moms and dads primarily. Sometimes it's daycare providers. And I've been finding too that now my podcast is listened to by numerous speech pathologists and speech pathology students, which I just love too.
That's absolutely fantastic. I'm so excited about that. And as you're talking, I'm like, yes. This is exactly what I talk about with homeschooling as well, because there's so much, homeschooling is such a gigantic boom right now that there's so much out there and everybody's trying this and trying that. And we need new curriculum. We need new that. But there's nothing for how your family absolutely works individually. And that makes a difference. And your individual child, like you said. And one of the things I know when my son was growing up is that when he was really little, I could see his brain move faster than his mouth. And he stuttered for probably, I think it was a good solid year and a half. And I was really concerned, but then I could see his brain. And as his brain developed more, it would get worse, and then it would get a little better, and then it would get worse, and then it would get a little better. And I remember talking with a friend who was a speech therapist, and she said, just hang on just a second, let's see where this goes. And I love what you're saying about let's not just see where this goes. Let's give you skills so that you can move through this process in a way that doesn't create habits, right? So can you tell me about how if we don't do this, if we don't get the skills to help our kids in early on, how it can develop into habits?
Oh, absolutely. So let's talk about your son first. So if in that situation, if stuttering had actually been the problem, it would have developed into more stuttering. But there are things that you can do to lessen the anxiety, lessen the pressure that's going on for your kiddo. And probably your speech pathologist friend, or maybe just your mommy intuition, helped you know that we need to watch his mind. We need to watch what he's doing. She could probably tell because there are hallmarks, there's characteristics of how a child speaks that we can look at that as speech paths and we say, that's not turning into stuttering, or that doesn't have the characteristics of stuttering. That's just a normal developmental type of disfluency. We know the hallmarks to look at, but it's difficult to explain to somebody when it looks all the same. So with your kiddo, his brain is developing much faster than he has motor control of his mouth. And to get his ideas from his brain to his mouth, that rhythm isn't there yet. And then he doesn't have that frontal cortex development that says, well, slow down and process and then speak it. But instead, he's trying to get all the words to come out at once rather than slow down and tell your words in sequence. You might have even noticed that with yourself sometimes when you have so much to say all of a sudden, especially if there's maybe a dangerous situation, you just want to say don't do it like that, but maybe you can get the word stop out in that moment and you can't put everything else together. That would be like the adult experience for your child regularly when they're little. So the modeling of, oh, I have so much to say. I need to get my words in order. Here's how I'm going to say it. And then say it in a calm, slower fashion would be just the example that a kiddo that's developing normally would use along the way.
That's
So,
fantastic. I love that. That would give me so much more peace.
yeah, because then you know that you are actually doing something, and we as parents,
Right.
we want to do something.
Right.
And oftentimes we push and try to get more busy, busy, busy. But what we need to do is take that deep breath and slow down ourselves, which moderates our children and helps them to slow because they will naturally mirror us. So if we are fast, they're going to be trying to do fast too. And this would be one of the common mistakes that I see among parents that I work with. Nearly all of them speak too fast to their kids. And the reason I know it's too fast for their kids is because their kids can't pick up on speech sounds or they don't pick up on the full concept. So, for example, the other part of your question, we addressed stuttering. What do we do for one example? Now, if we want to talk about sound development, again, you're going to slow down your speech because if your child isn't able to say certain sounds, it's quite possible that they are also not able to hear those sounds at the speed of speech. So the result of that is that they don't necessarily hear your words correctly. They hear most of the word. They're processing on what they do actually hear, which means they seem like they're not listening or behaving.
What?
So one feature that you can use that really has a lot of bang for its buck is to slow down how you speak and say all the sounds in the words. And when you get gentle, when you get joyful, and you are just simply talking like this, a little bit slower and a little bit more deliberately. You noticed I said the word deliberately, didn't you? So you say all the sounds in the word a little more deliberately. Your child will then begin to hear the sounds. I cannot tell you how hard that was for me to come as a fast speaker into a speech pathology program and know that I had to do this for my students day in and day out because I could not get them to do what I was trying to help them do until I was able to speak at their pace. So I had to learn how to speak at the 3-year-old pace, the 4-year-old pace, whichever student comes into my room. There isn't an actual pace for a 3 and a 4. It's individual. I just said that with a child in mind. So I needed to be mirroring them instead of them just mirroring me. So if I slow down to their pace, then they can mirror me back. They can start to hear the different sounds and they can begin to put more sounds, letters, words all together, which obviously impacts their listening, their comprehension, their reading, their everything, right?
Yeah, and their confidence to be able to convey their thoughts in a way that makes sense, and then there's no frustration there, which is something I definitely know that you deal a lot with, which I want to talk about for sure. That emotional like struggle that we have
Yeah.
when we can't communicate with each other. I know, I mean, how many of us do it with our spouses, but right. But with our kids, it can be something that really creates a relational barrier. So can you walk us through a little bit about how that develops into something to where we're frustrated and neither of us are communicating and that moves forward?
Sure. That's great and really, really important. So now if we have, let's say, here's an experience. You have a child, excuse me, a child who's not able to maybe come up with a word. So we talked a little bit about stuttering. We talked a little bit about sound development. So now I'll just use language development for the next example. We have a child that isn't able to come up with the vocabulary that you know you've taught them. You know you've used this vocabulary with them. But in the moment, they're not able to come up with vocabulary. And maybe they're using non-specific pronouns like, put the thing in it, put it in there. it goes over here. And you don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
Or maybe they just are stopped. That thing. They just can't get it. So you teach them again. You get frustrated because they aren't remembering. So you're frustrated actually because you haven't figured out how to teach them in a way they're going to learn. And then they can sense your frustration. So then they feel more pressure, which erases some of their ability to access the vocabulary that we're trying to get them to find.
Such a good point.
So our stress level causes them to not be able to do what we want them to do. So then we get in this sing-song pattern where moms and dads start to pull back and the child starts to talk less. And then we can either seek help to get over that, or that pattern begins and continues and continues. Then we have more of an issue. And this is common all the time. It's not abnormal. And especially with the advent of having online support. And the reason that it is a problem is parents don't know which technique to use. So they ask ChatGPT or they look on somebody's website and they think that must be it. And they are well-intended. They are trying their best to grab what seems like the logical next thing. And they apply what they know as best as they know. But if it's not the thing that your child is missing, it's not going to move the dial. And then it increases that relational thing. So then when parents come to me, the first thing we need to do is work on the relationship. The first thing we have to do is fortify mom's belief in herself or dad's belief that he's able. And then they need to fortify the child. But what happens is that mom and dad have to take ownership for the mistakes the child is making because the child doesn't have capacity for that. They're already feeling ashamed. They already feel not good enough. They're little. So mom and dad have to say and hold the space for that child. I didn't know how to teach you, but now I'm learning. I didn't have the patience that I wish I had. Can you forgive me? Those kind of healing statements we need to have mom and dad go through. Excuse me. And so mom and dad need to go through that experience of owning it. And when they do, that's impacting their ego for some parents. Like, I don't want to say that was my fault. It's not my fault. And indeed, it's not about fault. It is about who's capable of carrying the weight. Mom and dad are capable of carrying the weight, and these little ones aren't. So therefore, you carry the weight. And then what ends up happening is that brings up their childhood issues because they're carrying the weight of stuff that came in their childhood forward. So now we're dealing with subconscious trauma. I'm saying, holy cow, this is a lot, but this is where we end up going now that we've had the advent of AI, ChatGPT helping everybody know what to do, or parents seeking on their own because there's so much available out there, but where you begin matters.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I always say, just seek somebody who can give you your starting point and get your feet on the ground walking forward. Ultimately, we work through all that stuff, and then the kiddo is able to move along with mom and dad. But once you get into that relationship struggle, you've got more work to do.
Absolutely. This is so huge. There are so many parallels exactly to what I teach all the time. And maybe you guys are hearing this because this is something that when you're feeling the pressure, then it goes down to the child. There's more, we're feeling the guilt, the pressure, the shoulds is what I call it. Then they go down to the kids and then we lower level of learning. I call that the homeschool breakdown trap. And then we have all of these other things that happen with relationally that we have to fix first. I'm so happy that you said that. And because it's not just when our kids are older and then, all of a sudden the teenagers don't talk to us kind of thing. There's a lot of baggage around a lot of things that can happen initially. If we can get that right from the get-go, that makes a huge difference in how we communicate with our kids in the future throughout their life. And I'm thinking also of those kids who are, with their teens and they might not, or even early teens, and they might not have that language capacity. They might not have that ability to be able to express themselves in the way that they want to. And that happened from an early age. And now we're really, really having trouble communicating. That's something that I love that you talk about as well, is the listening. And so listening, I know for with kids who can understand, I teach it from, you know, elementary all the way through teenagers, but I call it whole body listening. And I know that's something that speech and language therapists talk about, is how to listen too. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I feel like if we understand how the body listens, that makes such a big difference in how we communicate.
Absolutely. And I think that what you say about it is exactly what I think. However, I think of it much broader. I think of listening as a multiple meaning word. So sometimes when you say to your husband, "Didn't you listen to me?" You're actually saying, "Validate me." Sometimes
Ah.
when we say, "You didn't listen to me," we actually mean, "You didn't do what I told you to do. You were non-compliant."
Mm.
Sometimes when we say, "Are you listening to me?" you mean, did you process what I said enough to execute? Did you process? Did it make sense to you? Sometimes when we say listening, we mean auditorily. Did you hear that I spoke to you? I mean, I sat down with some people and said, okay, these are the ones I came up with. And I came up with 11 different definitions for what we normally daily use for the word listen. So when we ask our kids, did you listen? They will probably just answer yes.
Mm-hmm.
And probably they will only think hearing. I heard noise come out of your mouth.
Right.
They will probably not think I processed what you said. They probably will not think I did what you told me to do. And they certainly won't be thinking I'm going to validate what you said. And then there's a lot of other definitions as well. So when we're telling our kids to listen, one of your whole body things, your eyes, ears, body, all of that is important. While that is important and true, I think it's also important to realize and become aware within ourselves, what do we intend when we say that word? What do we actually mean when we say that word? When we ask our kids to listen, is our intention for them to take the trash to the trash can? Or is it for them to think about, it's smelling. I wonder what I should do. And then they process and they figure it out. So listening is going to be on different levels. And if you can become aware of what your intention is at that time, you will probably not get as frustrated with their reaction to what you said, knowing that they probably are only thinking here.
That is such a good point. I love all those definitions. It's like, the 20 different meanings of snow, right? The 20 different words for snow and, that Eskimos have. But one of the things I want to make sure that we talk about before we end here is you actually created a method of communication called the Rooted in the Language of Play. And so we can't leave before we talk about play. So tell us about this methodology and how that helps us with our kids.
I love that question. I'm so glad that you brought that. So all of the methods that I use are rooted in play. And I want moms and dads and caregivers, everybody, teachers, whatever, to remember that when a child's brain is learning, that state that they're in is they are in a state of discovery, in experimentation, in exploration, in adventure. And when I say those words, I saw your eyes brighten up and you smiled automatically. We know that there's a state that we are actually in when I say those words. And so, listeners, if you were to just shut your eyes and think about those words, you would notice there's an opening within yourself where you are lacking expectation, you are lacking judgment, you're lacking correctness, because none of those things matter in that space. You are simply going forward in discovery of what happens if. And that's where our children live. And their young brains are always in that space. So if we, as as their teachers, as their parents, as the ones that love them most in the world, can get our brains in that space when we communicate with them, we will respond to them in a way that honors that they weren't trying to not take out the trash. They were thinking about something else in that moment and not processing. So we start to go at them with curiosity. What were you thinking when I said that? Rather than jumping to, I told you, why didn't you do it? But rather, when we start to get into the feeling zone within ourselves, we will feel this sense of calm. We won't be coming at them with that harsher language and that harsher tone, but rather we can get our brain, as moms and dads, into the state of curiosity. And then we can joyfully experience what they're thinking about. I don't know how much time we have. Do you have time for a story?
Yes, please.
Okay, so here's a real life example. One of the kiddos, I was working in the school, one of the kiddos, he was third grade at the time. He's sitting in the gymnasium and it was winter time and I live in Minnesota. So the kids were just, their movement time was walking around inside the gym while they're waiting for the various buses to come to pick up to go home. And if they didn't feel like walking around, they could sit until their bus came. Well, this kid was watching all the different feet and he stuck his legs out right into the walkway. And the teachers were telling him, don't do that. Pull your legs back. And he stuck them out again, pulled them back, stuck them out again. What do you think it looks like to the grown-ups? To the adults.
Frustrating.
Yeah, that's how they feel. And what it looks like is he's trying to trip the kids.
Right.
So the adults went to him and said, stop trying to trip the kids. He says, I'm not trying to trip the kids. He said, I saw you. You're trying to trip the kids. Stop tripping the kids. He gets in trouble, and I learned about 2 days later, and I know this kid. He's got a beautiful, tender heart. I thought, there's no way this kid was trying to trip kids, though his behavior looked like it. So I went and sat down beside him, and I sat down beside him, and I said, hey, I know you weren't trying to trip the kids. Tell me, what were you thinking about? So I went with that curiosity and I just asked him, what were you thinking about? And when I said to him that I know he wasn't trying to trip the kids, it was the first time in the conversation that he turns and he looks up at me with wide eyes. Otherwise, he kept his head down until that point. And when I asked him, what were you thinking about? He told me, well, I was watching the crack on the floor and there's this black line and the kids would step on the black line, but they never stepped on the crack. So I wondered if they'd step on my legs if I put my legs on the crack.
That's awesome.
Isn't that great? True story. But this is how kids think. This is how they wonder.
Yes.
They wonder not what we think. Their mind, they are not thinking what we think. And that is the biggest thing I think that I see parents make a mistake of. Thinking your child thinks like you. They don't.
Gosh, it's true. Yeah.
So if we can get into that space of curiosity, we can then earn the trust to be able to go in with those why questions. Why did you do that? What were you actually thinking? Tell me what was going on in your mind. And we will find out some magnificent things. And I've got all kinds of stories about that kind of behavior that is very different than what I would expect. And they had something very valid, but just not really intelligent maybe at the time, like for being able to see a consequence that might happen if.
It was a very narrow laser focus instead of a wider focus. Yeah.
Children don't think what happens beyond.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so for us to judge that they had intention for the what happens beyond is beyond the kid.
Right. Exactly. That's such a good reminder for us because I know I fall into that as well. Like, why didn't you just think of that? And he's like, I don't. Even at 17, he's like, I just didn't think about it. I don't know. And so it just didn't even occur to me. I don't know. But
you and I have places like that in our lives that it's like that. Like,
absolutely.
Like my car, I made a noise. I didn't think about why or what or whatever. And then a little bit later, my son-in-law's riding with me. He goes, didn't you pay attention to that? I'm like, I heard it, but I was busy. I just was thinking about other things.
Exactly.
And then, we all are still like that in some areas.
Absolutely. For sure, especially if it's not in our area of focus or our area of expertise or something that
Hmm.
we're not used to doing as part of our daily happenings. And that's exactly what
Yeah.
happens when my son says that. He's like, it just wasn't part of my job. So I like didn't think about that being, I'm like, why are these dishes still here? But I totally get it. That's so amazing. I've totally enjoyed this conversation so much. And I definitely want people to reach out to you. You have an amazing podcast, The Language of
Okay.
Play. And
Okay.
can you tell us about the podcast and how we can get in touch with you?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. My podcast is The Language of Play. My website is thelanguageofplay.com. My email is hello@thelanguageofplay.com. It is easy to get a hold of me. So yes, that is it. And then I coach for parents in groups. I'm starting my group program. And so if people want to communicate with me on that, I am just putting together the details to start a wait list for the next group. And then that'd be great.
Absolutely. And I know on your website you have a freebie that you give, which is 5 ways to
Yes.
get kids to listen better. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yes. I worked with lots and lots and lots of kids that have ADHD. Along with that, we developed certain strategies that are particularly helpful. And of course, if you can work with the kiddo that has ADHD, those strategies work for other kids too. And
Absolutely.
it's surprising how many moms or dads come to me and say, I tried that with my spouse and it worked. Because really it's real. It's human, isn't it?
I
And
love
it's
it.
5 simple basic strategies where you can start to incorporate what works for you into your home. It is a 6 email sequence, and the first one kind of tells you an overview, but the subsequent emails expand on why does that work in the brain? And when we understand why, we often say, oh, I get why I'm going to do this. And then it makes sense and it changes your whole family, your whole way of interacting. Yeah, it's good. I get lots and lots of feedback from that freebie.
I love this so much. Very, very exciting. Very exciting. I recommend that all of you go to that podcast and check it out, especially if you have littles. And although a lot of the strategies we talked about today are applicable to everyone, like she said. So make sure that you grab that 5 ways to get kids to listen better. And this is not the last you're going to see of Miss Dinalynn. That's for sure. We are going to connect in a lot of different ways here. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And we will see you next week. Bye bye.
Thank you.